like in the 90s. Oh, and then this is his passport picture. And then since they immigrated in 1989, and then me and my siblings were born in the 90s. So here are some cute 90s pictures with the hair and the outfits, high-waisted jeans and whatnot. Me, my sister and my brother, and some of the sacrifices that they made. This was actually like a really teary conversation with my parents. They talked about how much they missed their family back home in the Philippines. So this is a picture of my dad's family back home in the Philippines. Um, they talked about kind of regretting, I guess, not teaching my siblings and I either Tagalog or Pangasinan, and I learned that Pangasinan's actually like really a dying language in the Philippines already, because most people there are speaking Tagalog. So that was another sacrifice that they made, because back then ESL was like not, they didn't want us to have an accent. Basically they wanted us to assimilate as much as we could. So I don't know either language very well. And then conflicts. So on the left right here, this is a cultural conflict that my parents have had, but also I had and have had growing up. The idea of community versus self, like succeeding as far as like making your community better versus your own individual success. Because in America, the idea is to like succeed for yourself, whereas I would be in school like we should all work together, or like, oh, I have the answer, like I want to help my classmates do well on their tests, but that's cheating. So that was one of the conflicts that I had growing up. And then intergenerationally, the idea of what is a good career. I My parents wanted me to be like a doctor or a lawyer, those kinds of things, but I wanted to be a teacher, so I became a teacher. I did what I wanted, and I didn't go for being a doctor or anything like that. And then the idea of like always respecting your elders, um, even though they're even though like inside you're like, well, that was kind of like a little racist or a little transphobic, or like always respecting them and not calling them out on things. That was another intergenerational conflict that I had growing up. And then some of the struggles that I had specifically was just that tear between the American identity, like not being American enough, not being Filipino enough, like where do I even fall on that spectrum? Is there even a spectrum? Is there just one side or the other side? And just trying to figure out that intermingling thing. Also, coming out, I'm trans, and my parents and extended family don't really understand that, I guess. Like, it culturally, they're just like really religious, and they're just like, no, you shouldn't, you're a girl. And yeah, so that was another struggle that I had too. And being a model minority, like in many of the places that I've lived, since my dad was in the Navy, I moved a lot. I was usually the only Asian person, so people would always be like, oh, she'll be good at math. I'm just like, I am not. So another struggle was relating to my extended family, since a lot of them did know Tagalog and were born or raised in the Philippines, and I was not. There was a huge difference between their culture and what I grew up in. So anytime I'd visit, there'd be like jokes and stuff, and I'd be like, oh, I don't get it. So I've got a picture of like people laughing there, but it's like I would just be like, ha ha ha, I don't understand. So yeah, that was my own personal struggle. I learned a lot of really like things that I didn't even know about. So my family spans like across a lot of states, but it's mostly on my mom's side. So something I didn't know was that on my dad's side, a lot of them were hesitant. Well, not even hesitant. They didn't want to come to America. They really wanted to stay home, even though my grandpa was like, here's an opportunity, like, you should go have a better life. They more wanted to stay. But then on my mom's side, pretty much all of her siblings are here now. So we live in like 4 or 5 different states. I couldn't find a picture for Oregon that was for free on Canva, so Oregon should be on there. But we're in 5 different states in the US. I've got family on both coasts in Canada, and then I've got some family in the UK. So we're kind of like all over the place. And then on my dad's side, most of them, except for my dad and his brother, are here in the States. And my dad's brother lives in California. And my dad lives there too. So, yeah, that was my presentation. It was really hard to make that short.
No worries. It was really great.
I'm like, I could talk about my family all day.
Yay. This is really great, Carol.
Thank you. All right, so I will
Again,
stop.
everyone, round of applause. If
Thank
anyone
you,
has any
friends.
questions, please let Carol know.
I have a question. Well,
Yes.
first of all, awesome job.
Thank
Um,
you.
I relate to a lot of your story. Um, what do you teach, and how does your experience inform how you teach?
Oh, that's a great question. So, I got my degree in special education, and I teach mostly math and reading for kids who have, and I hate this label, but it's what my degree's in, mild to moderate disabilities. So, mostly like reading disabilities, dyslexia, ADHD, that kind of thing. Um, and I feel like my background has informed a lot of what I teach just because, like, even though most of the staff that I work with is white, we actually have a really high percentage of students who are black and brown in our school systems. So, um, just even being a face for someone, for some of these kids to, like, none of them are Filipino, but a lot of them are Latinx or black. So, just even being another colored person who's an adult, um, I hope helps them. I mean, nobody's ever come up to me and been like, "I love that you're you're the one brown person, brown teacher at our school." But um, yeah.
I have a question, kind of, where in Oregon do you have family? Because I live in Oregon right now.
Oh, so my sister lives in Eugene.
Okay,
She loves it there.
pretty far south from me, but yeah.
Oh yeah.
Cool, cool. Anyone else? Any
I have a
questions?
question.
Yeah.
So, Carell, like you broke the mold in a lot of different ways. Like, how was that navigating that? Was it like, F it, I'm gonna do it. Or was it like, oh, I don't know, I'm just gonna take these majors for 3 semesters and then nope, I can't do it. I'm gonna be a teacher. Like, how did you do
um,
that?
well, a lot of it, and it's really hard. Like, I guess my teen years, I didn't have like a super great relationship with my parents, but now that I'm an adult and they've seen like that I'm okay, that I came out okay, it's been a lot better. But it definitely was a lot of just F it and just, I just did it. Like, I did community college for a year to kind of like, explore a little bit different majors, but then the year after that, I just went right into teaching. Like, I knew it was what I wanted to do, and I just did it. Like, I don't know. It's not that I didn't care what my parents thought, it's just that I couldn't see myself being what my parents wanted me to be, if that makes sense. So, yeah.
I always get curious about that because then I have friends like who did end up doing the thing that their parent had wanted them to do, like an engineer or nursing or um, business, and then just being like miserable. And so for the people that just chose to just like, no, I'm not going to do it. Like I'm like, oh, did that? Like, how did that transpire? So that's really cool that you did that.
Thank you. It was not easy, that's for sure. Like, there were entire years where I just didn't even talk to my parents during college. So, yeah, like, it's definitely a, I don't even know, like, there's a balance there where you kind of do, you want to make your parents happy, you want to have that relationship with them, but also you want to be yourself at the same time.
Sweet. Thanks so much for presenting and sharing your family's experience, Carol.
Thank you all.
So it looks like we have 11 people go up today. So we'll split this in half. So we'll do like 6 this half, and then we'll do 5 the next. So who wants to go next? Oh, Sonia, do you want to go with? Okay, cool. And yeah, I think you can share.
Okay, let me try here.
Yay.
You can see this? Okay,
Mhm.
cool. Yeah, this has been an interesting project for me as well. Well, I'll just jump in. It's only 2 to 3 minutes. So my grandparents were the ones to migrate. So in the top pictures, my grandpa Steve and grandma Lily, they're my mom's parents. They're from the north. So grandpa Steve's from Ballesteros, Cagayan, and grandma Lily's from Agoola Union. They both spoke Tagalog. And I'm going to go quickly through each of their stories coming here. And then the bottom picture is my paternal, my dad's parents. So Grandpa Pete and Grandma Julie is what I call them, Pedro and Juliana. But they came from Cebu, so they spoke Visayan and Tagalog. And then in the lower picture, the boys is my dad on the left and my uncle Julius on the right. And they came in the 60s. And for this project, I interviewed my uncle Julius. I initially asked my dad, but he, for reasons unknown to me, he just is not open to this conversation. So I kind of know his story, but it was cool really to ask my uncle because he doesn't have kids. And so it's just really nice to get his lens on his whole experience coming here. So I'll start with Grandpa Steve, so my mom's dad. Again, he's from Ballesteros, the far north, like very rural farming community. He came age 18 to Oahu in 1946, kind of just like wanderlust and yeah, just looking for a better life. He actually was a sakada. So that was really cool to read about. And he worked in the pineapple and sugarcane fields. And he lived in Eva Beach in Oahu. And I guess what I learned from the readings was the contracts were each 3 years long. So I think he did it twice, 2 contracts in a row. And the hair. And then after that, he got tired of it. He had some interesting stories of just like how dirty they would get in the fields, burning the fields down in the day, but they would still go home, clean up, shower, and go out in Chinatown in Honolulu and dress up in their best and go out to the dance halls and all that. So 6 years of backbreaking work, he decided he wanted to try something else. So he joined the army during the Korean War. And he was stationed in San Antonio, Texas. He taught people how to drive tanks, which is kind of interesting and cool. And then after the army, he decided, I guess he didn't want to go back to Oahu. He wasn't sure where to go. But he had, I think, a cousin in San Francisco who convinced him to move there. So he moved there in the mid 1950s. And then moving on to my grandma Lily, she's also spoke Ilocano. So she was kind of in that pensionado type generation. She grew up in Agoo, a town on the coast in La Union. Her father was in the US military during World War II in the Philippines. So it was interesting. It sounded like he died young, unfortunately, but they lived off his pension, her mom, and then she had 5 sisters. So it sounded like they were a little more privileged than, say, my other grandparents. And yeah, so she actually went on to further her education, got a bachelor's degree in Manila at Far Eastern University. And then she was actually able to study at Columbia University and got her master's in psychology and graduated in 1954. She was one of the first Filipino women to graduate from Columbia, which is pretty amazing. And then, so on her way back to the Philippines, I think she was on a contract to go back and teach in the Philippines, but my mom said she was desperate to stay in the US. She experienced kind of like working at a summer camp in upstate New York and just like enjoyed being here. So she was trying to stay here. And she stopped for a little while in San Francisco to stay with some relatives. And happened to meet my grandpa Steve, at a New Year's Eve party. And then she just stayed here. And they raised their family in Mountain View. So they had 4 kids. My mom was one of them. They actually were very entrepreneurial and like hustled hard. They did lots of different jobs, but one of the things I hear the most stories about from my mom and aunts and their brother, my uncle, is they opened an Asian Filipino grocery store in Mountain View in the 70s, I believe. It's called Catley's Oriental Market, and they were like child labor there. They say they were carrying 100-pound rice sacks as kids, working the register and all these things. And so they were kind of like a bastion of the Filipino community on the peninsula. And she was like on the board of lots of Filipino organizations, and just very active and knew a lot of people. So that's kind of their story. And then I think what stood out to me about this project was I was able to contrast Grandma Lily's story with Grandma Julie, my dad's mom. So she grew up very rural, like in these far mountains in Cebu. My dad recalls when they'd visit her family, they'd have to hike through, like they'd have to walk to her family's farm, like over streams, through mountains and all these things. So she stopped school, I think, during World War II, just in 5th grade. So just like contrasting Grandma Lily, who was very educated, to Grandma Julie. And then she got married to my Grandpa Pete at age 21. They ended up relocating to Olongapo, which is Subic Bay, a naval base, US naval base, kind of closer to Manila, which is where my dad grew up. But from what I hear about Grandma Julie in Olongapo, even though they were far from their family, she was just full of life, and she was really good at what she did. She did lots of little things, but she raised pigs, namely, would go to the market and get scraps of food and feed the pigs. And then she also managed tenants in their building. And she and Grandpa Pete just really built up their life there. And she was really good at that. And then it all changed for her when they came to the US, which I think is the struggle piece for our family's migration story. But you can see her with her friends, I believe, in the top picture. She's on the left holding my dad, the baby, and they're at the beach. So it's just really cool to see her with friends. She was very isolated when they came to the US. My Grandpa Pete, so I was like the closest with him. My other grandparents passed away when I was in, my 2 grandmas passed away when I was like age 6. And then my Grandpa Steve passed away when I was a senior in high school. So I didn't have much time to really talk with them and get their full stories, unfortunately. But Grandpa Pete lived to be 89. And I had the foresight, I guess, to really talk to him, because he was super quiet. But if you asked him one question about his early years, he would just go off in story and just talk and so detailed. And like, I was really close with him. And I actually recorded videos of him talking and wrote stuff down. So if you guys have the chance to do that with grandparents or parents or aunts and uncles, I really highly recommend that. Yeah, and he was the youngest of 13, grew up very poor, a subsistence farm in Cebu. And I was fortunate enough to visit after he passed away in 2015. I got to visit the land there and meet his family, which was really amazing to put that his stories to like real life and see the river he used to play in and things like that. But he stopped school, second year of high school when World War II broke out. He helped American soldiers in Cebu that were fighting the Japanese. He'd like carry their stuff for them and whatever. He has a crazy, amazing stories about that. He, after the war, left for Guam and he found some menial work on the US Naval Base. And then when he got married to my grandma Julie, they ended up like saying no to her parents who were offering them land up in the mountains. And he got a job at a US Naval Base in Subic Bay in 1953. They had their two sons there, raised them, and then they finally got petitioned in the 60s when my dad was 15 to come to the US by one of my grandpa Pete's older brothers. And they came to where one of his brothers was in Mountain View, 1969. And yeah, I really got to hear my uncle's experience with this. He described Mountain View as like Mayberry in the 70s. In high school, it was very white area, but there was a small minority of brown kids and like Latino and Filipino students. There was a like fledgling student organization, so he found safety there with those friends. Challenges really is Grandma Julie was very socially isolated when she came to the US. She didn't speak English really, and she didn't work. So I think my grandpa too told me later on that he regretted that, like comparing her back in the Philippines, she was so full of life. And then in the US, like maybe with our modern viewpoint, like she was like going through depression and all that, didn't have friends. Their family here was all my grandpa's family. So it was really tough on her. And then for myself, I struggled a lot. This is me at my graduation from optometry school, 2013. But I really focus on bringing eye care to underserved communities who don't have access to eye care. Just knowing my background, like what Grandpa Pete would tell me, like, look how fortunate you are with all of your education. Like, I never got a chance to learn. We didn't have books. How could we learn without books? Just like you're so lucky and you've traveled all these places. So I think I try to use as best I can, like the opportunities I've had, my privilege to really give back and use my career to like improve systemic racism and just like the tiniest niche that I'm in, which is eye care. So this is a patient in the upper right using a fundraising campaign for my clinic. She was really cute and loved her glasses and was doing really well in school with them. And then for me, culturally, like my dad is super duper Catholic and very opinionated and pushy about it. So that's been one of my biggest challenges. On the other hand, my mom's super accepting and non-judgmental, but I've really pulled away and my dad has a really tough time with us not being Catholic as in the way he wants us to be. And then I married also, I grew up in a very white area. And so I've been struggling a lot with that with my identity. And then passing for Latina, like I've mentioned, I speak Spanish, just learning that in school. I use it a lot in my work. So I'm just unlearning a lot of things. I also married a white man who I love and adore, and we have a beautiful family, but there's a lot of cultural differences, which I didn't know existed, you know, but they've really come out the last 5-10 years. And so, yeah, it's just lots of cultural differences to work through and white male privilege as well. and then how do we raise our kids, you know? And I feel like it's my duty and responsibility to really pass on our Filipino culture. So yeah, I know that was probably longer than 3 minutes, but that's all I had. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Sonia.
Yeah.
All right. I think we have time for one question, so we can go to the next person, one or two. Feel free to unmute yourselves and if you want to ask Sonia any question. All right. And again, we can save the questions for later if no one wants to ask right now, but who wants to go next? Monica.
Okay, mine is gonna be, wait, can y'all hear me?
Yep.
Cool beans. Alrighty, we are sharing. Y'all see my screen, okay?
Yep.
Cool. Okay, so no history, no self. My name is Monica. Okay, so for this project, I interviewed my mom, and she treated it as like a speed round sort of type of questions and answers. So, anyways, so we are from the National Capital Region, and that green part with a heart, Pasig, is where we're from. Our barangay is Bagong Ilog, which translates to New River. Pasig is the city, and in Manila. Okay, in March 2001, my mom came to America, and her main driving force is her family. Most of her siblings already resided in the Bay Area, and it was really hard on her to be separated from her family. Yeah, so that was her main driving force. And this is our text. I asked her through text. So that was her response. Oops. Okay, and then intergenerational conflicts and any struggles. For conflict, interestingly enough, my mom said she couldn't think of anything. Wala akong maisip, right? And in my mind, I was thinking of all the things that she could have said or all the things that I assumed she felt some type of way about. She said she didn't know, she had nothing to say. And then for struggles, she misses everyone in the Philippines. And this, okay, could arguably be her conflict is yung mag-adjust ka sa culture ng puti. So it's assimilation, and also not just like outside of our household, but we also have relatives who married in who are white. For example, my brother-in-law, who my mom lives with him and my sister. And so I think that's also kind of where it comes from. There's me saying thank you to my mommy. And then some self-reflection. So something I learned about my family is that my mom missed her siblings. And I feel like I knew that because it makes sense to miss your siblings. But I guess before this conversation, I never really thought of my mom as her own person with her own feelings before I thought of her as my mom. But now, and also the other thing is she doesn't talk about her feelings, right? Like, so for her to say, I missed my siblings, that is the root of why I wanted to leave the Philippines and move to America, is for one, very different from I think from a lot of our immigration stories that we've heard. And two, that yeah, she's her person, her own person, and that she can exist like separately from me, like really blew my mind. And another is her views on assimilation. These are things that, again, she might joke about, but we've never really fully discussed. For example, like we often talk about language, and like she majored in English and she taught English in the Philippines, but she is so uncomfortable with speaking English here. And that like I don't know why she speaks perfectly fine English to me, but that's something that she struggles with. And then something interesting that I learned through this project, my family, I thought, was very open about their immigration stories. And I am now just realizing that the stories that they told me were all the stories of joy and success, but they didn't talk to me about the painful things. And that's why I put silence speaks volumes. Not only did my mom, I think her treating this as a speed round question and answer was by design. I think she didn't want to talk about a lot of stuff, and I didn't press her on it. And also, interestingly enough, I didn't just ask my mom these questions. I actually asked also my aunties and uncles in a family group chat, and none of them answered. They just kind of skipped on to the next topic. So again, silence speaks volumes. I think there's a lot of painful memories for my family, and I'd be interested in learning more. I just need to find my in. So yeah, thanks everyone. That was it.
Thank you, Monica. Salamat.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, any questions for Monica? I know there was a question from Carl for Sonia. So if you want to ask now, if anyone has any questions for Monica.
Sure. I know I'm like slow at coming up with questions. I
No,
like
no,
to
no,
ask
no. I'm
like
just kind of too fast sometimes.
So for Sonia, I was wondering because I also married a white person, but I'm like the only person who married a white person in my family. So my partner is like super uncomfortable when we visit my family. Do you feel like that's the same for you? Like, what is it like when y'all get together?
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, it's been a real journey. I think he's quote like brown inside, like he's been interested in like brown cultures and things like that, which is a little interesting to work through too for me. I feel like I'm more uncomfortable around his family, although I can really code switch because I've grown up around so many white people. Like it's very natural for me to code switch and just like play to that, like culturally, like how they want me to be, I guess, which is uncomfortable. But yeah, I totally hear you. There's so many conversations we've had. Even though he's very supportive of me and my journey, there's a lot of blind spots too, you know, just growing up like being a white male in society, where I feel like I've had to educate him a lot on POC type experiences, microaggressions, things like that. And initially he would question my experience, which was, I had to really school him on like, no, like you have to trust my experience, things like that. So it's been a journey. Yeah.
Thank you for your answer. And then I also had a question for Monica as well. I felt like a lot of that was super relatable as far as the like only sharing the positive experiences. I guess this isn't really a question, more of a suggestion. I don't even know. I felt like when I asked my parents about like we did all the positive stuff first, but then when we got to that question about like what were some of the sacrifices, like that kind of was my in, and it was like I don't even know, like do you feel like if you talk to them in person maybe it would be more like you would get more from them maybe?
Great question. I think yes. If I were in person, I think I'd be more comfortable probing and asking more follow-up questions. Whereas it's really, you kind of lose that nuance in text and in chat. But I don't know, my family has a way of kind of using humor, I guess, to
Mm-hmm.
to distract from the answer that you really want to find out. So on one hand, I would love to ask these questions again, just to see like what they would say. I was hoping that because I posed it as, oh, this is a project for class. I think that's the other reason why they weren't so open, to be honest. I think maybe I should have just said it was just, I was curious. Because now, like knowing my family, they're like, oh, why, like for class, you're going to present this, like someone's going to know and they're going to find out about us. Like, never, I don't know. That sounds incredibly paranoid, but also sounds very much like my family. But thank you for your suggestion. I'll definitely give it a shot next time I see them.
I didn't do
Yeah.
mine in person either, but I feel like if I was there, like I did it over the phone, but yeah, that's
Oh, I
just
could
like
have
if
done
I
it
was
over the
there,
phone too.
maybe that would
Right?
have been, yeah, maybe I would have gotten more out of them. But anyways,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, of course. No, thank you.
I love the creativity though. That I mean, I don't know how far along are you. I'm like, that's so creative that you screenshot those text message boxes, and it was just so cute. So another suggestion, like, don't even tell them about the projects. Just be like, because parents are so they want to love their kids, they want to like fix it, they want to protect them. Like, oh gosh, mom, I'm struggling so hard right now. Like, I'm really having difficulty with this, whatever, one of the questions that you want to know. I'm like, how did you do that? Well, what did you do? What did you do back in the day when you're going through this? And then so maybe that's like a little way because like, oh, I'm gonna fix Monica, but maybe I'll like share little tidbits on how I like overcame that. Um, and that's also what I do as a therapist too. I'm like always tricking people to like open up. So I'm like, you give a little, I give a little, you know what I mean? So
I
um
love that. Yeah,
yeah.
no, thank you, Emerald. I'll try that. I'll tug up my mom's heartstrings, see what I get. Thank you.
Yeah, because I mean, it was really hard. I had to do a similar project, and it was hard because I had to call them from the Philippines and it's like bad reception. And on top of like the vulnerability, but like now with my mom living here, like literally across the way, like I'm closing the door. No one's leaving this room. Like, sorry. I'm very proby. Um, but the other question I have is for Sonia. Like I said, because I noticed you had two little ones. I don't know how they are now, but like I don't know, are you a second generation as well? Like me?
I'm like, is it 2.5? Like my mom was born here, but my dad was born there.
Okay.
And my kids are 1 and 4.
Okay. So like how, and they're so young and they're so beautiful. How like will you, or I don't know if you thought about that, like how would you pass on that part of your identity or that culture to them, also coming from like a bicultural family. I mean that's just something like I'm always navigating and struggling like as a second gen when you don't like know, like, so this class has been so helpful and so healing for me because it's like I'm just getting my mind blown, like things I don't know.
Yeah, totally. All of that. Like this class, like just being on my own journey, learning, like I'm trying to build my book collection just to have those books in the house, like on our history, psychology, and all that. When they're older, we can have these conversations, and just doing my own personal like strength and research all that in myself. And then yeah, I totally resonate with, I feel like yeah, like it's getting diluted through the generations, Filipino-ness. Like I don't speak the language. I want to learn, but it's hella difficult. I think I took one class, it's really hard. And I want to go back to the Philippines, take them there and things like that, and have hard conversations about all the stuff going on there. But yeah, I totally hear you.
All right. Thank you all for your questions and the amazing discussion. Does anyone want to go next? All right, one. Oh. Did y'all want to go? Hayden and Logan?
Sure.
Okay. I will get back to you, Juan.
No worries.
Alright. Share this. Okay, so this is my family history slides. So I'm only half Filipino, so my grandparents were from the Philippines. So my grandpa is named Ponciano, and he's from Balamban, Cebu, and my grandma is named Josephina, and she's from Ogno, Pangasinan. So they met in Manila for college, and then they immigrated to the US in April 1969. And they had 3 children, Judy, Niles, and Jesselyn. And my grandma was pregnant during the immigration. So they wanted to immigrate because they wanted a better life in America, and it has more opportunities for jobs and things. And this is a picture of my grandpa's workplace, and he's the only brown guy in there. So they had to sacrifice their life in the Philippines and leave all their family behind, and to have a chance to succeed in America. And they came to America without a job lined up, and that could have gone wrong, and they could have lived in poverty. But they lived frugally so that all of their children could attend college. And yeah, they mostly experienced like racial conflicts. Like a landlord refused to let them rent out an apartment because they didn't want colored people there. And then also their accent was made fun of. What I learned about my family is my grandpa actually speaks 4 languages: Tagalog, English, Visayan, and Ilocano. And I learned that my mom was actually the baby who was in my grandma's stomach, and she was conceived in the Philippines but born in America. This is kind of short, but I'm done. Well, this is kind of off topic, but when I interviewed my family, it kind of inspired me to learn more about Filipino culture. And I discovered like the martial art, which is pretty cool. And I decided to try it out. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Yay. The floor is open. Any questions for Hayden and Logan?
So are you guys twins?
Oh yeah, we're
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Mystery has been solved. I was wondering the same thing.
And how has your guys' experience been growing up Filipino or half, I guess, Filipino?
Yeah, we're half Vietnamese. So we're like really Americanized. Like we're 3rd generation Filipino and 2nd generation Vietnamese. So yeah, we didn't experience anything had to do with like being Filipino or Vietnamese.
Did you grow up around other Filipino or like mixed kids?
Not really. There was just a bunch of like white people and Asian people.
Though all of our friends are Filipino, because we just naturally gravitated towards them.
That's what my husband's experience was. Like they lived in Mountain View, so all the Filipino kids just hung out and then crew together. Like, are you guys from Cali or are you like from another
Oh, we're in
state?
California. We're actually
Oh.
like attending high school in Los Altos, which is like next to Mountain View.
Okay, you're like 20 minutes away. You're right there. So yes, you're just in a very predominantly white
Yeah.
area.
Do you guys go to Los Altos High School?
Oh yeah.
So you should know that there's an ethnic studies class that will be there next year. So if you want to like learn more, the elective is available this year, but then they're going to do a class there next year.
Cool.
Yeah.
And a quick question, Hayden, Logan, Vietnamese, Filipino, you guys must be eating really good. What's your like favorite food?
Paling banh mi. It's Vietnamese. We don't really eat much Filipino food. I like lumpia. What's a lumpia? And ube ice cream.
I'm just like, wow, that you guys are taking this course. Like, good job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Hayden. Thanks, Logan. Juan.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Do I have share screen access?
Opo, sir.
Salamat. Okay, this is going to be interesting because technically after I go, Juana has to go, which is my sister. You guys didn't know, that's another mystery solved there.
Sure.
Okay, let me know if you guys can see this. Okay. Cool.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
so no history, no self. This is me, Juan E. the fourth. The E stands for Akibon. That's my mama's side. Because Juana's in this, would it be fair if I took all the glory? So I was like, I'll give you a little bit. I'll give you the pop side. So I'm gonna give you my mom's side. A quick overview, real quick overview actually. So I'll give a background of who my grandpa and grandma are on my mom's side. The immigration arc where the big shots move, and I'll explain why that's in quotations. And then province to city, mama earned, that's my mom, moves, or her story, and then how life was in the States. Okay, let's get it going. So this is my grandparents, my mom's parents, or this is my grandparents. My mom's mom and dad went to become one, you know what I mean? So that's my grandpa, Ernesto Akibon. We call him Erning. Everyone has nicknames in the Philippines, especially our family. So we call him Erning. He's from Poblacion Zambales, which is in Region 4. It's like the California equivalent of Luzon area. And then we have Grandma Euphrosynia Nena Akibon. We call her Grandma Nena. She's from Pangasinan, Alaminos. So they courted kind of similarly to like the War Brides, where they talked for like 3 months and they didn't meet until like the last 2 weeks, and then they got married. And they were super Catholic in that they had like 10 kids. So my mom was the third one. Okay. So what had happened was Grandpa Erning got petitioned earlier than my grandmother. So he got petitioned by his brother, who's there in the bucket hat. That's Grandpa Hip. He served in World War II. He was General MacArthur, one of General MacArthur's translators when he went to the Philippines. He's hella cool. And then my grandma followed suit along with the 3 youngest siblings to America because they were all under 18 at the time. They assimilated pretty well, as you can see. My grandma, you're just teasing out right here on the right photo, taking pictures next to TVs and stuff. And my grandma they're both educators. So my grandparents both spoke really good English, so they didn't have trouble with the language barrier. But my grandma was mostly stay at home, but she was like, she would get bored. So later on, she would like go on to volunteering in blind shelters in San Francisco. So they settled in SF. And then my grandparents ended up petitioning my mom over along with me and Joanna. My mother was like pretty provincial person. So when she moved to America, she felt most of the hardships. She was very like timid and like shy, very introverted. And my dad was left in the Philippines, and Joanna will explain why that is. This is her in her younger days. That style is actually pretty cool now because that's really relevant. So it's kind of blowing my mind. But she pretty much raised us as a single mother. But that's from like kindergarten to like high school when my pops was able to come back. And she did this the whole time without being able to drive. She has like really bad anxiety, and she's like deathly afraid of trucks. So she failed her driver's license like 3 times. But throughout all that, she was able to do like knock shifts in like tech companies, and then she eventually became a CNA, which was her original profession in the Philippines. So yeah, she clutched it pretty much. Shouts out to moms. And so now we're here. Me and Joanna both graduated, living the dream that my mom wanted us to. And that's kind of my mom's side. This is recent. This is like 2 weeks ago. So she wanted us to flex this picture because she wouldn't stop talking, but she wouldn't send me pictures. But this is the only picture she sent me. So yeah, that's it. That's the presentation. And then stay tuned for part 2.
Thanks, Juan. And then Wanda, you go next. Hey, Camille.
Am I going now?
Yep.
Yep. You have to go.
Oh
Here
my
we go.
gosh. All right. Let me share my screen. Oops. All right, can you guys see my screen? Is it small?
Yep. No, it's good.
Okay, cool. All right, so like my brother said, he covered my mom's side or my mom's side, so I am covering my dad's side. So no history, no the Ednalinos through Papa. I called him Papa. Papa Ednalino's eyes. Unfortunately, he had passed away about 5 years ago, so I wasn't able to directly interview my dad, but I was lucky enough to know stories because he was very adamant of distilling the Filipino tradition in us. No conversation like pertained to just American lifestyle. It was, well, in the Philippines, you do this, and this, and all those stories. So I know a lot, but I was also able to interview his sisters, one in the Philippines and one here. So we are from Region 3. I think my brother said Region 4, but you're wrong. It's Region 3. So we're from Zambales, which is in central Luzon, which has 7 provinces, and we are from Zambales. That has 13 municipalities. Sorry, I have a hard time pronouncing that. And then 1 urban city, which is Olongapo. And we are from Candelaria, which has 16 barangays. And this little video is actually a video that a clip that I took 3 years ago, right before the pandemic, through one of our streets. And then this big photo, the Zambales map, is actually a photo that I took at one of the restaurants. So it kind of shows the barangays in Zambales. The immigration to US. So the top right are my dad's parents. We called them Papang and Mamang. They first got here, Papang got here first in 1984 because he was serving in the military. And then he soon became a citizen after George Bush passed the bill for veterans and military people to get their citizenship. And then about 5 years later, a little more than 5 years later, Mamang was able to come here with actually not the help of my grandpa or Papang. It was actually through her daughter who was on a working visa as a nurse. That when she came here, she petitioned my grandma or Mamang. And then my brother touched on my grandparents on my mom's side. And then the right photo is just my dad and his dad looking fly for a wedding. And then the bottom one is actually my grandpa. He was featured in a newspaper when he became a citizen. So he's doing his oath taking in that photo. So before the US, both my parents, as my brother mentioned, went through a lot of sacrifices. And although my mom had to be a single mom here in America, it was also very difficult for my dad because he was away from us for so many years. So for 20 years, it was very difficult for him to cope with that because his family's gone and he's living with his family, supporting his family, like his mom and siblings over there in the Philippines. So we were across the globe for 20 years. He was alone with family. He worked at as a nurse at a high school and pretty much saved his whole check to get petitioned. So although like we did yearly trips to the Philippines, my mom, my brother and I, it was fun to us because we were so young and we were like, oh, cool, we're going to the Philippines. But it was more for proof that my parents are in a relationship and it was easier to get petitioned in that way. So as long as like we had to like show phone card purchases that were actually talking to him and show like the phone like bill that has the like all this complicated stuff. So it took a very long time for my dad to get petitioned. But this is so the first photo is actually me in 1997 when we were flying out to America. And my mom obviously dressed me really weird. And then in 2013, my parents finally got married. So that kind of pushed for my dad to get being able to come to the US. So it took a while because he came here in 2007, but they got married in 2003. Some cultural conflicts that my dad and he would always talk about is like not like having burgers and stuff, not his thing. He needed rice with his food with every meal. But also he was not used to, because in the Philippines, it was, he was used to having the whole house or the whole family home for dinner and everyone eats at the same time. So let's say someone were to come home late, then you wait for that last person to come home and you guys eat as a family. As for over here, like we were all in different times. Like I was in college or I was in high school, I would like, you know, go out with my friends and like he would eat alone with my mom. And like sometimes my mom would work late and like he would have to eat by himself, you know, so it was very hard for him to adjust to that. And although he knew English and was very well at it, he didn't really understand it because he would tell us that we would talk slang or just talk too fast and slur words. So that was kind of one of the things he didn't really like. And the obvious one, like being away from family, and his mom's actually still alive. So Mama is still alive. She's going 97 strong, this 97 years strong this year. So she, you know, he missed his mom. He's a mama's boy. So that was very difficult for him, and just to help his like his siblings and stuff that are still stuck in the Philippines, he just wishes he wished he could help more, because I heard a lot of stories when my dad passed away where a lot of my aunts and uncles would tell me like this is his plan, like he would have like his siblings lined up and like all these plans he would have for them, how to help them. He was also not used to having to work like 8 hours or more sometimes because of overtime of just all work. And like, so he's a nurse in the Philippines, which sounds crazy, like wow, he's a nurse, but there was a lot of downtime. You can hang out with your friends, you can drink after work, you know, and it's okay to come to work kind of hungover because it's the Philippines. And over here it's not like that. It's very strict. You go through very, you know, detailed hiring process and background check and stuff, and he was just not used to having to work hard in a different way. So the photos, the top right, that's my dad and my mom. That's my dad's photo when he had to get his visa to work in Saudi Arabia when he was a lot younger. And then my mom when she was kind of like her nursing, she went to nursing school in the Philippines. And then another conflict was that we didn't have much help. So like the bottom right that's my yaya. So she was kind of like our helper at the house. So she would help us kind of raise me, my brother and I until we moved to the Philippines. Actually when I last went to the Philippines, she visited and it was kind of just interesting to see because she recognizes me because she kind of remembers how I look, but like I don't know who she is when I'm so young. So it was cool to meet her again, I guess. But those are some of the conflicts. And then what I learned, the struggle was truly real. Oops, sorry. And it truly takes a village. It's not just your immediate family that helps raise people or your family. It truly, because my aunt got my grandma to come here, and we took a lot to have my dad come here. So it took a lot of us as a whole to raise us, but also all together help each other out. And one thing that my dad always distilled in us was to continue to share stories and to give back to our home. I am very close to my family back in the Philippines. Even though my mom's kind of accustomed here in the US and my dad's gone, I still kind of keep close contact with them and try to help them here and there because I'm kind of considered like the lucky one, or my brother and I are considered lucky ones where we get to experience America. And although it is hard here, like they don't understand, but they have it hard there as well. So we're always being a helping hand whenever they need to. And like, there are just these few examples of when we visited the Philippines where it looks like we're all having fun, but these are things that it's memories that they probably wouldn't have been able to make if it wasn't for us. So we are helping them and giving back to them, make memories and having them explore the Philippines themselves, because that's not an everyday thing that they can possibly do. And then just a random photo of the bottom left is my dad's, all his siblings. Actually, I don't think that's all of them because there was like 10 of them. And then my mom also had 10 siblings, so it's a very huge family. But yeah, that is all. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And any questions that we have for Juan and Juana before we go into our little break that we have lined up? It's not break yet. I'm just putting it up. Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear your dad passed. But that was a beautiful presentation. So how old were you guys when you came to the US?
I was 3, so my brother was 5. So we were really young. So we actually came here not knowing English. We only knew Sambal, which is our dialect in Sambales, and kind of Tagalog, mainly Sambal. I'm kind of sad that I don't know too much of it anymore. My brother is pretty good and kind of trolls on me, but I wish I still knew how to speak.
Yeah, I absolutely troll on there because most of our relatives speak in Sambal. Like my dad only speaks Sambal in the house. So he would talk to me in Sambal and yell Juan in English, which I guess that kind of works out because getting yelled at English sounds scarier.
All right, it is 7. It's about to be 7:44, so we'll go into a little break and then we'll come back here at 7:49. Thank you.
Yeah, I'ma turn you to a feminist. I'ma turn you to a feminist. See, I'ma turn you to a feminist. Yep, I'ma turn you to a feminist. Yeah, I'ma turn you to a feminist. See, I'ma turn you to a feminist. I'ma turn you to a yeah. 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 Hello, America. Break your backs for dollars, they don't carry ya. 7,000 miles away from home with language barriers. Land of opportunity. Tell me, is it good to you? But 6 feet deep on stolen land is where they bury in November 1991. Papa came here with a wife, 2 daughters, no money, but they wanted them a better life. Peaceful to their name, so they piecing up the pain. Ain't no peace in the position as an immigrant is pain. For a piece of that Americana pie, you're for the cream. To a piece of dream they sold you, but it only was a dream. For a piece of mind to thinking that my mama could be seen as an equal, not a foreign immigrant or in between. I was a kid in the sky, nothing but dreams in her eyes, hoping that we would survive. But mama, those were the times. They telling us compromise, they always feeding us lies, made to believe I don't exist unless I wear a disguise. Cause I be constantly lied to, broken down till I cry, till I no longer recognize the person that was inside. Until we fade like the sun and we forget where we from, then we self-hate till it's done and never question it once. So mama, tell me we won, the person that I become. I have a sword for a tongue and a skin that shines in the sun. And because the place that I'm from, it still lingers deep on my tongue. And so every word that's from my lungs can hold the weight of a ton. If I'm ever slipping, I'm never looking down. I do it for myself till the end to hold it down. And even when I'm sinking, I'm never looking down. I do this for myself till the end to hold it down, yeah.
Mama will make it in America. Mama will make it in America. Yeah, mama will make it in America. I swear, yeah. Mama will make it in America. Mama will make it in America. Yeah, mama will make it in America. I swear, yeah.
Feeling homesick as we go. Mama's never really home, cause she working all alone. Living broke, we need a loan. Papa threatened mama's life. Papa left with no goodbye. Promise to myself inside, no man will ever make me cry. Now I'm thinking that I'm grown. All I wanna do is roam, running far away from home. In the crowd, I feel alone. Mama, she be working late. Lines are showing on her face. Too much pressure on her plate. I'm too selfish to relate. Auntie says stay in your home. Might get darker cause you prone. Look into the mirror, oh, Filipino blood and bones. Questioning my skin and tone like I should be embarrassed though. Whiter skin is seen as gold. This is what we're always told. Mama said to learn the race. Every day I emulate till identity erased. Overcome by inner hate. Teacher said to hide my tongue. They don't understand me none. Hold my breath, these foreign lungs too powerful. They lack a gun. I'm correcting mama's words. I'm embarrassed when she slurs. What makes me better than her? This language wasn't her first. Ruby, can you get a grip? Find a balance to my slip. Mom and Donna need you quick. Stop thinking that you the shit. 7,000 miles from home, but a million more to go. Gotta make it on my own. I can feel I'm getting close. 7,000 miles from home, but a million more to go. Gotta make it on my own. I can feel I'm getting close.
Mama will make it in America. Mama will make it in America. Yeah, my mom will make it in America. I swear, yeah, yeah, yeah. My mom will make it in America. Yeah, my mom will make it in America. Yeah, my mom will make it in America. I swear, yeah, yeah. My mom will make it in America. My mom will make it in America. My mom will make it in America. I swear, I swear, I swear, yeah. America. Oh, America. Mama will make it in America. Mama will make it in America. Yeah, Mama will make it in America. Yeah, yeah, I swear.
Hello, hello. All right, let's wait a minute. All right, hello. Alrighty. So it's 7:50. So the next thing on the agenda is our second part of our project presentations. Who hasn't gone yet? I know.
Could I go?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Jackie.
Yeah, no problem.
Oh, before Jackie goes, I actually had a question for one. I just might, yeah, I didn't click. No, I didn't say it. How, like, how did you guys cope with being away from your dad for so long? And you don't have to answer. I was just wondering because there's a lot of separations in our family, and that was very norm. Like I was away from my sister for like 6 years. She was just sent over there. There's just a lot of separations, and it's really hard to come back over once you're there. So like, how did you guys deal with it?
Go ahead, Joanna. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to?
Sure. I mean, for me, I was young, so I was 3 when I came here, so I didn't really, I guess, understand. I mean, I would always question my mom, like, oh, why do we have to call my dad every night? Like, because when it's night over here, it's morning over there. And they'll be like, when growing up, I remember like 3rd grade, I would pretend I'm sleeping because I didn't want to do it. Like, I was like, I don't know, I didn't have a relationship with my dad at the time. But being able to visit him, and they were very transparent with us about what was going on. So I think that's what helped. Like there was no secrets. We would ask them questions, my dad would answer. So it was just more understanding. Like now that I'm older, like I am very grateful. And that's why I want to give back to my hometown in Candelaria, because that I would have never been anywhere without that place and my family. So I guess, yeah, I was too young to understand, but now I appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, and kind of to add on to what she said, my mom sacrificed a lot of her paychecks. Like she would save up for us to visit him like every other summer at least. And because me and my dad share the same name, he's 1/3, but we call him Johnny. My family on my dad's side would always stress of like the culture and like your roots, like, hey, this is your family, that's why you're the fourth. To a certain extent, there was that added pressure of like, hey, if like you are the keeper of, you know, like the ancestral house, or like you have to know these stories. So in America, when you teach your kids this, like you can pass this down, because when you're in America, you know, like Monica's mom says, the cultura of the puti, you know, they really have that into you. And Sambal, which is our dialect, I don't know if it's a dialect or a language, like no one speaks that anymore in our town. It's mostly Tagalog or English. So that in itself is kind of the ancient and a little bit. Um, so yeah, they tried really hard to keep us connected. Like Joanna said, it was confusing as a kid, but as we got older, it kind of made more sense and we got in tune to it. And we visited often, so we didn't lose that cultural connection.
Thank you for sharing. All right. Jackie, are you ready?
I think you're muted, Jackie.
I definitely just talked to myself. So I was just trying to remember how to do this. I was like, oh. Can you all see that?
Yep.
I'm only working on one screen, so I'm sorry if it's small. But we'll work with it. Maybe I can present. Hold on. Let's see. Can you, okay. Is it full screen now?
Yep, full screen.
Okay, cool. Hi everybody. My name is Jackie. And then this is my project. I wanted to show you just a couple of pictures first. The first one is on the left is my daughter. She's in second grade. She's 8. And my husband and myself. And she this year was in second grade, and she did her country project on the Philippines, which is so awesome because I remember being in second grade and not wanting to pick the Philippines, and so it was this whole kind of full circle moment. Um, and I'll kind of go into that. The picture in the middle, I'm an ethnic studies teacher. And so I love, love, love teaching ethnic studies. And for the past 4 years, it's really helped me figure out and kind of just kind of this journey. And so this project is something I have my students do. And in that, I feel like I've been continually working, like learning more and thinking about kind of my story and my identity and doing a lot of healing work. And then the last picture, that's my family. And so my daughter is 8 and my son is 5.5. So much of the stories that we've already heard tonight, I like am connecting so much. So. Um, what region my family is from in the Philippines? So my dad is the country boy, as he likes to self say. He is from Pidig, Ilocos Norte, and he is the only male out of 4 siblings. And then my mom is from the city, from Makati, and I'm told Fort Bonifacio, when I was doing research, is not really there anymore. It's like Bonifacio City or something very um, urban and fancy. But she's the oldest female of 7. So when my family immigrated to the States, so the big picture, I'll talk about my dad first. He immigrated in 1970, and both of my parents, and right now I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. My grandmother was widowed and she had 4 kids. And so she remarried my step grandfather, who is right here in the bottom left, kind of standing with my grandmother. And he came over in the 1930s, like from Hawaii and then into Salinas and into kind of the agricultural area. And he settled in Half Moon Bay. And if y'all know Half Moon Bay, it's on the coast. It's about a half hour south of San Francisco. And so he was from Ilocos, and he went back to Ilocos, Pidig, and was looking for a wife. And so my grandmother, they kind of knew of each other, and he married my grandmother. And my grandmother was able to bring her 4 kids. So that's my dad in the middle right here. And then those are his siblings or his sisters. And my dad came in 1970 when he was 15. And then my mom is a nurse, just recently retired. Her grandparents were already in the States. They lived in Foster City, California. And my mom's mom was the only sibling that did not come to the States with their parents because she was already married. And so what my mom's grandparents did is they petitioned her after she was in nursing school. So she came over when she was 21 after nursing school and in 1979. And so we've got roots in the Bay. Some of the sacrifices that my family had to do to survive, I think my parents talked a lot about leaving siblings and leaving relatives. My mom was the first one to come, and she was the one who had the education and kind of the career lined up. My dad left everything like his relatives in Pidig. And because my grandma was a widow, a lot of the people in the neighborhood, they raised my dad and his sisters. And so when he got on that plane, he didn't return for like 30, 40 years. And so uh, I think that was really hard. And then as a young couple, like having me, their new careers, like the family dynamics, the language. My dad spoke Ilocano and Tagalog and English, and then my mom only spoke Tagalog. And then my dad was in the Navy, so very similar to what Carol, you were saying, but like my dad was in the Navy, my mom is a nurse, and then my dad got a very stable job at the post office. So a lot of sacrifice. I love pictures, so you'll see a lot of like pictures in my slide deck. This is there's a lot of intergenerational things that I know happened kind of in my family. My grandmother, my dad's mom recently passed, and so this has been a really interesting time for me because we have had a lot of family get-togethers. We had her funeral, and so with that celebration of her life has also come up a lot of intergenerational conflict. My mom's relationship with her grandparents when she came over, they were super strict. She couldn't go out without a chaperone. And then this dynamic of she's the one who made it, so she constantly felt as though she needed to take care of her siblings, and she did. And she helped them come over, gave them a place to stay, gave them provided them with financial assistance and stuff like that. The dynamics with my dad's mom are really, really interesting, especially with him being the only boy, and his sisters. And so you can kind of see my dad and my mom, that's me as a baby, my grandmother and my step grandfather. The bottom right or left are my dad and his siblings and my grandma, and then my dad and my mom and me and my second brother. But there's a lot of dynamics, and it's really interesting, especially since we had my grandmother's funeral. We saw a lot of that come out, which was interesting. So things that I've learned, because this year has been a lot of learning, a lot of doing interviews and talking to all sorts of relatives. Um, just being able to connect my parents' story and see it in the history that we've covered in this class. Um, to be able to place my family's story on the timeline of history is amazing because I grew up not. And because of my work as an ethnic studies teacher, how important that is and how affirming that is for me now as a person, but also as a teacher, but also how I wish I had that as a kid has been really cool. Hearing their struggle, but their excitement, it's that balance that they're always, but I think somebody else mentioned it before, but the narrative that they choose to tell, and the focus on joy, I think is the beauty of all of this, the resilience. Um, Having a greater understanding for why my parents did what they did, especially with language. I don't speak Tagalog. I only understand it. I'm the oldest of four, and so I feel a lot of the same pressures I think that my parents feel. Um, and but I get it, and I think as a mom now, I get it even more. And I think that's something that's really important. Um, And so up here, this top picture is my brother, my second brother, his wife, my spouse, my sister, and my youngest sibling, and my kids. There are four of us in our family. We're all about 5 years apart. So I'm the oldest at 40, and my youngest sibling is 26. And so that dynamic has been really interesting. And then my parents, my kids are the first grandparents, and they love being Lolo and Grandma. And they are amazing, and they come to every game, and that's just kind of like what my parents did for me. Um, and then I wanted to share this picture because this is kind of my entire family on my dad's side. And I've been closest to my dad's side just because they have, if there's anything, like we get together and it's a good time. But this was in April, and everyone came out, everyone showed up for my grandma, Rose, and every grandchild, every cousin. And so it was really cool and healing and beautiful to see like how powerful and how amazing my family is. And so it's really made me want to deepen the understanding. Um, I got to write my grandmother's obituary, and so I was able to learn a lot of this stuff. And so I feel like it's really just, it's been really exciting to kind of finally start to heal and tell our family story, especially because there's so many of us. So that's it. That's all I got.
Thank you for sharing, Jackie.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Jackie, thanks for sharing. Where do you teach ethnic studies?
I teach ethnic studies in the San Mateo Union High School District, so at Cappuccino in San Bruno. And so I know, and what's really exciting if you're in California is ethnic studies is a grad requirement coming up, and everybody will have to take it. And so I am beyond excited because I can think of how much I needed it and how exciting it is that we get that.
I resonate with that a lot. Yeah. Thank you for doing what you do.
For sure.
Thank you so much again, Jackie. I have a list of some people here that haven't gone yet. Does anyone want to volunteer? Kayla, Serafina, Josh, you said you haven't gone yet. I know Mar hasn't gone yet. But, yeah.
I can go if no one else wants to right now.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, let me just present. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Serafina, and this is my No History, No Self presentation. Oh. Okay, so this is a picture of me and my parents. My mom is Black and white, and my dad is Filipino, so I'm actually mixed and only half Filipino, but I'm gonna focus on my dad's side of the family. And so my dad was actually born in San Fernando, and his dad is from Pampanga, and then his mom is from Quezon City. So all kind of like the same area, like Luzon, but yeah, I actually didn't know where he was born exactly in the Philippines. So that was kind of cool to talk to my dad about. And so this little picture of the family, my dad is actually the youngest by a lot of 5 kids. So he has 3 older brothers and an older sister. And he immigrated to the Philippines when he was just a year old. So he has a really different experience even than like the rest of his family and his siblings. But my entire family story kind of revolves around my grandpa, my Lolo Gregorio. And so my family, they lived like a pretty comfortable life in the Philippines. Like I hear stories about like each kid having their own nanny, and like they lived in this kind of a residential place behind this commercial like size building. My Lola was a college professor, and then my Lolo owned and ran a pawn shop. And so he would trade and buy with other businesses. But in like 1968, 69, during the Marcos regime, he got caught up in a bad business deal and like was involving like weapons or something. And so he had to, it was dangerous enough that he felt he had to flee the Philippines. And so my grandpa actually came to the US first, flew into SF, and he had a sponsor, but he was the first to kind of move here, and he worked a little bit to kind of like establish a home, I guess, for the rest of my family. So my dad, my Lola, and then my dad's 4 siblings came to the US not too much later. And so when they moved to the US, they lived in San Francisco near Dolores Park, if you know where that is, kind of in the Mission area. My dad remembers it was like right across the street from a church. And they lived in this apartment flat. So already kind of really different from what they had in the Philippines. And then this is my Lola. She worked all the time, lots of jobs simultaneously. Like my dad remembers her kind of like coming home from one job and only seeing her like when she was cooking dinner, and then she would have to rush out to like her next one at night. And then my grandpa was an accountant, and he worked for like a corporate financing or leasing company. But some other kind of struggles they had were leaving behind this familiarity and life and community in the Philippines. But I didn't really get to dive into that as much with my dad. But the things that like I kind of inferred from like our conversation was just like how difficult it probably was, especially for my grandparents, just to have this like switch in resources and privilege coming from the Philippines and being pretty comfortable, and then moving here and like having different situations with like their house size and childcare, which seemed like pretty surface level, but I feel like also kind of translated to other aspects of their lives. And then another struggle was kind of this education, at least for my grandma. She, as I mentioned, was a college professor in the Philippines, but so she had her master's in teaching credentials there. But when she immigrated to the US, that didn't transfer. And so she had to like kind of get her degree again. And so she actually got it at San Francisco State University, which is pretty cool. And then in terms of my dad, I think it's kind of cool he immigrated at such a young age that it really gave him a unique experience compared to my grandparents and even his siblings, because they were kind of a little bit older than him when they immigrated here. And so I'm technically, I guess, like half like first generation immigrant, but sometimes it doesn't feel like that because my dad came here when he was so young. And so he feels very American. I think like that's how he sees himself. And so he understands but doesn't speak Tagalog. He's a musician and like a radio producer and announcer for a living. And his like immigrant identity and is just not something that he always talks super openly about. And so it kind of makes me wonder like how central that is to him, and also like what being Filipino American means to him. And makes me really think about like how that's also impacted my identity, being mixed and also being his daughter. And then this is a picture of my dad on the left. So my dad is the little baby in the car, and then his youngest older brother is there with him. And then on the right, that's him when he was like maybe like 25. And I think that was his first trip back to the Philippines since he was born there. And then some of my personal struggles, I have quite a few, but one of them is just like having these conversations. And like this is a really nice project, just getting to make the time and kind of like forcing myself to like think about these questions and really ask them to my dad, because he doesn't always talk about them just day to day, but when I do ask him, he really likes to talk about it, even if he doesn't always have the full story. Because a lot of this is just like kind of collections of things that I've heard. And so you have to kind of work to get the specific details. And then another thing is I went to a Spanish immersion elementary school, so I'm fluent in Spanish. And then, my last name is Cortez, and like the colonization of the Philippines. So like, I have always like kind of, that's also been a part of my identity in a way, because I don't feel as connected to the Philippines because I don't speak or understand Tagalog or Kapampangan. And so that's another thing that I've grappled with. And then location, I live in the Bay Area, California. I live in Redwood City. And I used to live in Daly City, which is kind of like a little Manila, but I don't anymore. I've never been to the Philippines, and I go to a predominantly white institution. I'm in high school, go to an all-girls private school in Palo Alto. So I'm pretty sure there are maybe like 2 other Filipinos at my school. So I don't have a huge Filipino community outside of my family and my grandparents that I maybe see a couple of times a year. And then finally, also being mixed, it's taken me a while, and I'm still working through kind of embracing all of my identities unapologetically. Thank you.
Thanks, Seraphina. All right, I know we're running out of time. Does any who wants to go next? Volunteer to go next?
I can go.
Okay, thanks, Kayla.
Oh, wait, just kidding. I think I have to allow it to share.
Okay, you probably have to log. It'll probably kick you out of the app, and then
Yeah, I'll be back.
yeah, for sure. All right, while Kayla is restarting, does anyone want to go? We have Melissa, Josh, Mar. Okay. Thanks, Mar.
Okay. Hello. Can you
Hi,
guys hear
Mar.
me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I don't know if this is gonna work too. The sharing. Let's see. Share. Okay. Share.
Yay.
Do you see it?
It's loading for me. For me, it's loading.
It's loading for me as well.
Okay. Is it working? Does everybody see it?
I
don't
see a
really
dark
know.
screen. It says loading.
Sorry, I don't know why it's not quite sure why it's not working.
Yeah,
Do
maybe
I
try.
also have to exit out?
I don't think so. Maybe just try unsharing and then sharing again. Sometimes it'd be like that.
Everything just got so laggy. Sorry. Oh, oh no. Yeah. I don't know what to do. Oh, okay. Maybe I should just exit out of this.
Yeah, maybe like just unshare first and then reshare.
Maybe just, oh. Pot. Stop. I don't know what to do. I'm gonna just pause my share. Would it be best if like I send it to someone?
Let me see. Can you just
Also,
press refresh on top on your browser? Maybe that will work. Just refresh it
oh,
on.
wait,
Yeah, just refresh it. Maybe it'll work from
okay.
there.
Share. Um, ah,
Okay, yeah, I can see it. Yeah, can everyone see it?
everything's like lagging now. I can't hear.
If you want, you can share it with me, and then I can present it for you.
Ones. Okay, I'm gonna pause the share. And then I should just send a link. Um, so problematic. It's
Thanks for
just not
sharing
working
some.
completely.
So while you do that, what we can do now in the meantime is we can have Kayla present, and then you can send me the link, or you can send me the link directly, and then I can share it after Kayla's done. Cool.
Okay, let me try sharing this time.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Yep.
Can everyone see?
Yeah.
You guys can't see yourselves, right?
We can see your screen.
We can also see ourselves.
Oh, okay, let me minimize. Okay, there.
That's good.
Good? Okay.
That's good.
Okay. So this is my project. My name is Kayla. As I was completing this, there was a lot of questions, not only about like my family history, but also just my own like identity and self that came up. So one of the biggest questions that popped up in my head is, who am I? And this is just a collage of all of the important people in my life that I feel like have helped shape me into who I am today. And I'll talk about them as we go, but just looking at it, the photo on the top left is me and my partner. And then we have some of my baby pictures. My mom's side of the family here. To the bottom right is me and my dad. And this photo here on the right hand side with all these little kids, this is my dad's side of the family, and all of my cousins. So that's what came to mind at first. But just as a preface and foundation for my history as we dive in, this is me. My name is Kayla. My middle name's Cheyenne, and it's actually a combination of my parents' first names. And I'm currently 23, and I was born in Redwood City, California. But I grew up in Daly City and then moved to Tracy, California when I was in 3rd grade. And like my elevator introduction is like, I'm a queer 3rd generation Filipino American, but I'm a 1st gen college grad from a 4-year institution. I'm the oldest of 3 siblings, and I'm also the first and oldest grandchild on both sides of my family. So these are my parents. We'll start with my mom. So her birth name was Shauna Cheryl Peñas, and she was born in San Francisco, California, and she is the youngest of 2. And my dad, Ian Joseph Bloss, and he was born in Oakland, California, and he is the second oldest of four. And just as we go on, like my history is going to stem mainly from my mom's side, unfortunately. My dad's side, I know a little bit, but as I got older and now, my dad's side I've come to learn is a little difficult, I guess I should say, but if you want the chisme, I can fill you in later, but yeah. So this is my grandma, and we call her Grandma Pinky. And she got that name Pinky when she was growing up in the Philippines because when she would cry, her face would turn really pink. So everyone called her Pinky, and it kind of just stuck with her. So this is her story. So her name is Josephine Minor Peñas, and she was born in Rizal, in Luzon, and she immigrated to the US on September 25th, 1972 at 17 years old. So these are a few photos of her, and actually on the left-hand side, this is a picture of her parents, my great-grandparents, and this is their wedding photo. My great-grandma is full Filipino, but my great-grandpa is actually half. So that is them, and I thought that was kind of cool. And you can see at the very bottom, like the studio that they took it at in Manila. So yeah. So why did my family immigrate to the US? So my grandma has four siblings total, and her older sister, who we called Auntie Merlin, wanted to come to the US to get a better life. And we were fortunate enough that because my great grandpa was half white, he was already registered as a US citizen because his dad was full. I believe they were Dutch. So that kind of made the immigration process a lot easier for her and her siblings. But because my great grandma was not, she was a Filipino citizen, it made it a little bit difficult. But when her sister wanted to come to the US, she basically gave them an ultimatum because she was like, look, I want you all to come to the US because I don't want to come back to the Philippines. So you're going to have to come here. So right after my grandma graduated high school, within 6 months, they got rid of everything and they made their way to the US. So some sacrifices that had to be made from my grandma. She said it was a really quick transition. She had to say basically goodbye to her life in the Philippines and move on into this completely new environment. So all of her friends and her relationships. And I asked her if that was like a hard transition for her. But she said it wasn't because a lot of her friends at the time, their families were also planning on coming here. And she mentioned she had a boyfriend at the time, which was really sad to say bye to him, but she moved on. And my great grandpa actually in the Philippines, he had to retire as a mechanic for Lever Brothers. And that I learned was a company and they make like Dove soaps and laundry detergent. So he served as a mechanic for them. And once they got to the US, they stayed in San Francisco because my great grandpa's sister actually came here in the early 60s and she got married. So they bought a house in the city, which served as their like petition and sponsor house. So whoever they brought in from the Philippines, they would stay there. And that's where my grandma and her siblings were. And this photo here is a picture of my grandma and my great grandpa, great grandma, and then this little boy at the bottom is my ninong, and my grandma's sister to the right. So some conflicts and struggles. When they came here to the US, even though my great grandpa did have money saved for them, he was able to get a job a week after they came to the US, and he worked as a mechanic at a gas station. And my grandma knew that even though they had money saved, she needed to, if she wanted to better her life, she also needed to get a job. So she attended Heald College, and she got a tried to get a certificate in accounting, which is similar to like an associate's degree today. But she dropped out, and she was decided to just work as a key punching operator. And one of her struggles, she said, was she felt that she got married and pregnant at a very young age. And the same trend happened with my mom. She also had us very young. And when my mom had me, and as I got older, she was like, okay, this trend stops with you. You need to, one, don't get pregnant, two, go to college, and you need to have a better life than we had. I said, done deal. No kids for me. So some things I learned as I was talking to my grandma, I asked her if there was any big like cultural changes as she transitioned here to the US. But I found it really interesting because in the Philippines, she said she went to a private Catholic school, and she spoke English all throughout school. And I was surprised because I didn't know that. And she said even like when it was recess, or if they had free time, if they had like monitors going around, and if they heard you speaking Tagalog, they'd fine you 5 cents. And I know it doesn't seem like a lot now, but back then it was a lot. So I was just surprised because from a lot of my other family members, being a Filipino who doesn't, I understand like a little bit, and I also don't speak it, but I feel like they look down a lot because of that. And I'm always like frustrated because I'm like, why didn't anyone teach me? Like, I want to learn. And as I get older, it's harder to learn and understand. But knowing that my grandma spoke English at a very young age was really surprising. Another thing, this is something I learned from doing this project, but it's something that stuck with me. When I was about like 10 or 11, I remember my great grandma, she would tell me stories about her growing up in the Philippines. And it sticks in my head because I just hear her describing this distinct memory of when Japan attacked the Philippines. And it's ironic because we learned about this last week, but how she described it was like she remembers hearing the bombs and running to hide, and you just see stuff flying in the air. And I can only imagine what it was like during that time, but because she remembers that and it happened so long ago, it really impacted me and it stuck with me now. And now that we're learning about it more, it really puts it into perspective. Another one is growing up, my grandma said that like all of her school friends and her classmates would all come to her house, and that would be like the house to be at. My great grandma would make food and everyone would just eat, have parties. And still to this day, I feel like our house is still that house. Like all my friends growing up would always want to go to my house. My grandma would always cook food. So it's just cool that that kind of stuck. Another thing is that I learned is kind of like a privilege check. I was surprised to hear that their transition here to the US was not difficult, I guess, but it's also because my grandpa down the line, they were white, so that definitely made an impact. But on myself, I had the opportunity, like I grew up in a very diverse community. And it wasn't until I went to college where I really experienced microaggressions and feeling like a minority. And that's primarily because I went to a predominantly white institution, and that was like a huge culture shock for me, because I was looking around and it's all these white people, and I'm like, where's all like my brown people? Like, where am I? And I remember like my first few weeks, I went to the dining hall with some people on my floor,
And I was just went to go grab my food and I started eating with my spoon and my fork, and everybody's looking at me. And I'm like, you guys don't eat with a spoon and fork. And obviously being in a PWI, there was no, it was all like burgers, pizza, and I'm like, I need rice, I need something. So to do that, I made me and my friends, like all the brown people stick together, and we would cook in our dining hall in the kitchen. And I remember one time we were making adobo and you could smell it throughout the hall. And I remember these group of white girls came in and they're like, what is that smell? It stinks. And then we look at each other and we're like, we're cooking adobo. And they made a complaint to our like hall monitor about the smell. And I was like, that has never ever happened to me in my entire life. And doing like experiencing some of these things, and as much as it was a struggle, I really value the time that I had during my undergrad because it really made me more culturally aware, I guess, of where I come from, and made me question a lot and learn a lot. And we had like our multicultural community was small, but we were very close knit. So we were all trying to advocate for one another, learn more about each other's cultures and clubs and Greek life and all of that. From a multicultural standpoint, I wanted to get involved in everything. So that has had a huge impact. And also another thing is a big part of my history and identity, there half of it being from my dad's side is very unknown. Like I'm only basing it off of like my mom's side, but my dad's side, unfortunately, I don't know a lot. And I know there's probably a lot of important history on that side. And maybe one day I'll be able to learn more about it, but I just feel like part of me is still missing. And the last one is my mom's expectations of me and my lifestyle versus my grandma's. Um, when I was completing this project, where I was talking about last week how like being a nurse or being like a doctor in the medical field was considered like successful, transitioning here to the States. And my grandma never pushed that on me, but my mom did as I got older. And I feel like every expectation that my mom set for me, like you need to be a nurse, that's where all the money is. I didn't, and I wanted to do something completely different. I feel like every expectation I did the exact opposite. She wanted me to find this beautiful man, and here I am dating a woman. So trying to adjust to that is still a little bit of a struggle. Kind of those expectations, and my mom kind of put those on my siblings, like my sister. As she's getting ready to go to college, she's like, I need a nurse. I want one nurse in my family. And when I hear those things, I ask her, I was like, Ma, like, what nurses do we have on your side of the family? Like maybe down the line, like her cousins and extended cousins, that's where there are, but like my immediate family, there are none. And I'm like, we did just fine. So why now are you trying to implement that into us? But that's a whole nother conversation. But these are some of the things that I learned. But I think that is it. Thank you.
Thank you. Cool. Looks like we have a few more people, and I know we only have we have 9 minutes left, so I can share your slides more, and then we can go to the last two individuals. We might go a little bit over if that's okay with everyone, but yeah, let me just go share this real quick. All right, take it away, Mark.
Okay, cool. Hi everyone. My name's Mar. Mabuhay. Okay, next slide. Do I just say that? I'm gonna just say next slide. Okay, sino ako?
Yep.
So I was born in the Philippines. I was born in Baguio, which is like known for being a a tourist location. It's up in the mountains. I'm 23 years old and I'm living in the Bay, specifically San Jose, but I like to travel around the Bay because it's a pretty fun place. Some things I love is like culinary, history, hence like why I'm here, like culture, learning, taking away kind of like putting the power of learning in my own hands rather than from like a systemic like point of view or like from a university, right? I'm super into like flora and fauna and plants, ecology, cooking, cars, and like all of this is because of like how I was raised. Next one. And so these are my parents, nanay at tatay. So my mom was born in Bawang, La Union, and she also grew up there. She was the third kid of like four sisters. So it was just like a family of all women. Her dad, or my grandpa, died when she was younger. So it was just like a single mom, like raising all four of them. And she loves cooking. So that's like kind of like where I got that passion from. And as for my dad, he was born in Baguio and he lived in Baguio until he was like 11 and then moved to Guam and then came back to Baguio to finish out like the rest of his school years. He was also the third child of four children, and he's some of his passions is like cars and RCs. And next one. So the cuento, this is how they met. My mom moved to Baguio for school at St. Louis University. She got a bachelor in science and commerce. She got a minor in marketing. Pretty cool, pretty cool. The way that my dad like made his move on her was that he yelled her name and then like ran away. And then she went and confronted him about it. And then he was like, do you want to go on a date? And they ended up going on a date. And then that's how it happened. So they've been dating ever since like 1992, which is like, I don't know, that's a while ago. 30 years? Yeah. And their first child, my older sister, was born 94. Me, I was born 99, and then my younger brother was born in 2008. And yeah, that's how they met, and they've been together like ever since. I think they got married the year I was born. The next one. Imigración. So this is kind of like how the story of like how we immigrated to the States. So my dad first immigrated to San Jose in 2001. He was working as like random jobs, mainly in like security, just to send money to us in the Philippines. He already like put his petition for us in 1999, but we didn't end up like coming to the States till 2005. And so like a lot of the work was like kind of like proving to, again, like to the government, like this was like a real relationship and that it wasn't just like for immigration purposes. So I guess that's why it took so long. And we've all like lived in San Jose until like 2020, and then my parents dipped to Central Valley. I mean, rightfully so, it's cheap out there. The next slide. And paghirap at sakripsyo sa buhay. So it's just like the struggles and like the sacrifices of life that like they face. So for my dad, one of the struggles that he really felt while he was in the States alone was like not having his family with him. In the Philippines and Guam versus the States, it was a bit different in the way we like our lifestyles basically. So it was more, I'd say, peaceful and chill, like back home. And then here in the States, it's like everybody's always moving. Everyone always has to do something. The land was kind of like unfamiliar because, you know, we lived on like the island. So it was like we were kind of secluded. Um, my dad always had to work because not only was he providing for himself, but he was providing for us back at home. And one of his like biggest fears was like like the roads here, like the freeways specifically. He just said that like he would always avoid the freeways as much as he can, just because everyone's always going so fast on them, while like in the Philippines it's a lot more congested and you can't really like zoom, you know. As for like my mom, she was raising two children like on her own with the help of Lola, but it's just like she was basically raising me and my sister in the Philippines without like my dad. She obviously like missed the whole family and not being able to get that like moral and like physical support, and like it was only like financial. Some things that she struggled with was like the long distance relationship, and was like the trust. Just like from whatever trauma that she has experienced growing up, and like the loss of like family memories, because like he wasn't there for a lot of birthdays and a lot of her Christmases. He wasn't there to like celebrate certain things that she's done. And for the both of them, when we all immigrated to the to the States, sorry, when we all immigrated to the States, they had no help in terms of like watching us, me and my sister. So my mom had to work the day shift while my dad watched us. Then my dad had to work the night shift. So they were like always missing each other, not being able to kind of like spend time with each other. We didn't really have any family or friends because we were out here alone. One thing that they really did struggle with was like the difference or the culture shock in between American culture and like Filipino culture. And she always mentioned how like in American culture, like respect isn't mutual. It's always like it's earned rather than just given right away. And she faced that a lot even from us as kids, because like, I mean, I'm gonna be honest, I was kind of rude when I was younger, but then like I realized, oh yeah, it is probably like American culture. And so she like faced that, and just like not being able to raise us the way that she was also raised, you know, and like being able or having to adapt to that. They also had no financial support. It was just two of them. That's why they were always like working and never had time for like the whole family. All right, the next one. Oh, next one. Oh, oh, yes, intergenerational conflicts. So yeah, what I was saying earlier, like teaching us Filipino culture when like American culture was really ingrained in us, just because like most of the time we spent our time in school or after school programs. So that's like that was our environment. Um, Standing up for herself and themselves, that's not really like inclusive to them, as like obviously they're very we are like Asian, we're minority presenting, and we were in like San Jose. So they kind of stood out. We didn't really live like on the east side. We were more, where did we live? I think we were like on the south side first. And so in the south side of San Jose, it's like it's predominantly white. Um, so it's just like that, those like little things that they had to like face. One thing that my like parents always like mentioned was like how capitalism is very like predominant in the States, whereas in like the Philippines it was not. uh a lot of people would rather live life in the Philippines rather than here. It's like very money motivated, and so that's like the fast pacedness of American lifestyle, the States lifestyle, was hard for them to again adapt to. um and because we had like no friends or family in the States, we didn't really have like a community, so it was just four of us for like a long time. All right, the next one. Oh, some things that I learned, aral. So a couple things that like I learned is that I didn't know like the reason why my dad like quit school. I thought like he quit school because he just found that it was like not fit for him, because that's like how I am. But he actually left school so that he could move here just to like work and support us. Um, they yeah, again, like they, my mom, growing up, my parents thought like American culture like poisoned our mindset, and like we were losing like our culture. And I think like for a while, like me and my sister did lose it, but then now that we're older, we're realizing like that's why we're getting back to our roots. um and just kind of like the synergy between my mom and my dad is that my mom loved cooking and my dad loved eating, so they worked. And so that's kind of like where I also like find a lot of my passion for cooking from, is because of my mom, and I associate like cooking with family and good times and spending like precious family time almost. All right, and the next one. Oh, and this is something that my mom would always say. Yes, that is it. Salamat. And that's just my family.
Thanks so much, Mark, for sharing. All right. Looks like we have two more people to present. We have Josh and Melissa.
I can go next.
Okay.
Share my screen. Get my slides out.
And again, tonight we'll kind of be going a little bit over, but not too much over. Thanks again for everyone's participation.
Okay, I'm going to put a timer because I want to be conscious of people's times. Let me put this on and present. Oops, sorry. And go. Okay. Enter. Okay. All right. Slow. Who am I? I am 24 years old from San Diego. I'm the eldest child. I'm also first generation. So both my parents moved, immigrated from the Philippines in the 90s. I'm also a Navy kid, as I just said, and I am a Pinay in policy. So state government and policy is my stuff. I am the first in my family to do a lot of this, enter this new space. So it was really cool to be working with like Ron Bonta and like all of this fun stuff at Capitol. Anyways, just want to give the context. Come on. Okay, just want to show some family pics. That's my Lola from my mom's side. My dad and mom looking clean on their wedding day. And that's when they had me before my little sister came in the picture. And I joke around that she ruined the dynamic, but it's all jokes. And then my Lola, I'll call her Mamang on my dad's side. Let me see. So my mom's side, she's from Marikina City. She immigrated in the 90s when she was 19. She's the youngest of the family, yet one of the first ones to come to America. And because of that, she didn't get to complete her college education. But because of that, she felt compelled to join the Navy because of all the benefits. You know, they lure in a lot of Filipinos to join because they couldn't complete their education. So that's my mom. I think she's badass because she helped a lot of her family members come to the US, even though she was facing like a lot of hardship, a lot of culture shock, didn't know how to navigate things, etc. I'll talk about my elders. So on my mom's side, talk about their youth a little bit. So my nanay, my grandma, she had no high school education. I think she stopped school at like 3rd grade and she ran away from home to be a spinster. So she was heavily abused and almost treated like a slave in her original home. So she went to Marikina to work in a factory. And then that's when they met at a clothing factory and he would just serenade to her. And I thought that was just the cutest thing ever. And I'm never going to settle for less. But they had a 10-year age difference, which I thought was just very cute. Anyways, the war came, World War II. Tatay, my grandpa, joined the Navy war in the 50s. He fought in Bataan, which was covered in the last lesson, and was a prisoner of war and walked barefoot, which was just so interesting to me. And Nanay was almost a war bride. I realize I'm running out of time for the Japanese, so she was always in hiding. And then they immigrated in the 90s. Tatay applied for citizenship because of veteran privileges. It was, again, scared to communicate, culture shock. Mom joined the Navy, brought in more of the family. Come on. So their life, that's some pics of me and Gramps and Grandma. After the war, he still worked as a bookkeeper on an office on a farm. While Nanay was a stay-at-home mom with 8 kids and had to care for pigs to sell at the palenque market just so that they could survive. So some more pictures. Look at my mom, and grandpa, stuff like that. But yeah, that was the family. Dad's side. So I'll preface this by saying I'm not too close to my dad. I will explain why. But basically my dad's from Project 4 in Quezon City. So it was a struggle for my dad. I had to get some of this information from my mom, but his dad was abusive, cheated on his mom, and left the family when he was 4 years old. So obviously he has a lot of unaddressed trauma that I've been trying to extract out of him during this project, but he gave me as much as he could from his own perspective. Like many of you have said, they give us their own story, right? But he saw the American culture as like hardworking, independent, assertive, and he kept saying the Philippines was like a third world country, people are passive, da 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 da. And I think it's just all just the way he grew up, because his brother was also on the streets a lot, in drug crises and whatnot. But he wanted to join the Navy, so he immigrated at 24. So he didn't give me too much to work with on the stories. He just gave me a lot of pictures. It's pretty cool in this picture. But here's on my dad's side, my grandma and stuff. I will, that one. So a lot of the story is just a blur, but I just know that my grandma was really hardworking and resilient, and she took care of the family as much as she could. I know that she was a teacher, but as I got closer to like end of her life, as I was growing up, she had dementia and Alzheimer's, so I couldn't really talk to her and get to know more of her story. But I know she takes care of me and she looks after me in the afterlife and whatnot. So yeah, she's cool. And then there's more pictures of the family. I'm not going to go in depth, but this one in particular is just really awesome, just to have my mom meet one of my bosses at the Capitol, and it just came like very full circle, and I feel like just making her proud and stuff. But yeah, just some pictures of the fam, and that's it. Thanks. I'm gonna read the chat
Thanks
now.
for sharing. Thanks for sharing, Melissa. And I think lastly we have Josh. I think you might be muted still.
Can y'all see my screen, or is it just showing my desktop?
Oh, we can see your screen.
Okay. So this is my history, self project. I did this while recovering from COVID, so that was not fun. And my parents didn't want to talk to me because I caught COVID, so this made it even harder, but it is what it is. So the region my family is from is Luzon region. Like going specifically, my mom is from Pandan and my dad is from Dagupan. They actually interacted with each other, but they didn't know this for a very long time. Like they'd always travel to the same locations, but they've never actually met each other. And it was until their families actually started talking that they actually had interactions. So when and why did my parents immigrate to the US? My mom, Josefina Datuan Deloma, at 17, immigrated to the US in 1981. Her dad fought in World War II, and he was able to take his entire family to the US eventually. He had to work several years in a naval base, but thanks to the War Bride Acts of 1945, it allowed him to take his children to Guam. Unfortunately, their mom was, I should say moms, as fun fact about my grandpa, he married like he married his first wife was his first wife died early in the war, and then he married her sister, which is my mom's mom. So they have a lot of kids. I believe 16, which is unbelievable, but they were all able to go to Guam eventually and move to California. As for my dad, he didn't immigrate until he was 28 in 1988. And he spent a lot of time talking to my mom over the phone. They had to use those pay cards, and they wrote letters to each other. They didn't go into detail about that. They just said they wrote letters and had calls and we sent each other photos, and like their families would make fun of them as it's like, it's you should just go visit him. And then eventually she did, and they got married in the Philippines. And she moved back to the US, and he eventually moved to the US about a year later, as he also finished his bachelor's degree, which allowed him to have a fast track immigration pass. And he was seeking career opportunities in the US. The sacrifices that had to be made, my mom's siblings had to take care of each other as their moms were no longer alive, and their dad was always busy working at military bases just to provide funding for them to continue getting their education. Although he was very, very frugal, and he made them send IOU notes for lunch every time, and schools got very angry. I don't believe they ever paid for those. And before they moved to Guam, she was trying to get into a nursing program, but my grandpa, he was very resistant for her to go into a program. One, he wanted to save more money so they could eventually move to California. And her siblings said nursing school was hard. And like every Filipino's nurse, you should do something else. And she did, but then she became a nurse eventually. My dad, he was offered a teaching position at his alma mater. He didn't tell me what school he went to, but as he got married to my mom, he decided he would just go to the US. He believed they would respect his degree and, he could have, again, better career opportunities. Didn't happen for a while. But as he was the only one to finish college, he was essentially the breadwinner for his family or his siblings and their kids in the Philippines. So leaving them behind was a big blow to him, as he didn't have a great relationship with his father since he sort of jumped ship and left him with nothing. So there was a lot of intergenerational conflicts just because of that. But my mom, she felt like she wasn't enough for her dad since like he was a war hero. Her siblings, who were all older than her, had jobs, either working for the military or nurses themselves or going to college. But she wasn't able to do so. And again, she argued with her dad, like, let me become a nurse. My sisters are nurses. They're making a lot of money. He's like, no, it's too expensive. When you get a job, maybe you can become a nurse. For my dad, because he has a lot of issues with his father, and like he was very afraid to be a father. Like he didn't believe in himself. He was trying to be a father for his siblings and, provide the love and care that they never received from their father. So he actually got into arguments with like my mom's siblings in regards to her becoming a nurse. It's like, yeah, it's a good career. It's a lot of opportunity, and it can help our family when we have kids. They just argued and argued. And this is a photo of my parents giving my younger sister her baptism. I do not recall this at all. But this is a photo I found in an album that I had access to. Content warning. In regards to my mom, she faced a lot of physical abuse in the United States, especially after her siblings, started their own families. Because initially they had each other, they supported each other. But when my mom became more independent, when she gained her first car, she got into an accident and it left her unable to move by herself, and it took several years of therapy for her to recover. And it was at that point her siblings felt really bad, as usually they would be the ones to help her. They would take her to work, or at least accompany her to the bus. And this changed a lot of things. As for my dad, his bachelor's degree was not respected in the US, and he had to take extra exams and qualifications to even get a job at the LA County. He initially wanted to join the Air Force, as he wanted to prove himself to my mom's siblings, as they came from a military family, and he was, he just wanted to be an engineer. And he potentially could have gone into the Air Force as a captain, but he needed $100 to take another exam, which he didn't have, and no one would give him $100. So he found an opportunity at the county eventually, or LA County, as a civil engineer. Something I learned about my family, my mom faced a lot more harassment compared to her siblings and my dad, because she wanted to be independent. She wanted to do things on her own, which, she had more than a right to do so, but at the same time, as she wasn't getting as much support as she could have had, it left her open to a lot of danger. And my dad, he still felt a lot of shame after that happened, especially since he couldn't pay for the therapy for himself. His degree didn't get him a job he thought he would gain, and it took a lot of collective work from their siblings to help with my mom's physical therapy. And this only fed my dad's insecurities about being a breadwinner. He didn't want to acknowledge that he needed support. And it's funny because it's the same thing has happened. My mom she's lost the ability to move on her own again. So now collectively as a family, we're trying to support her as best we can and continue her physical therapy at home. So he just feels even more secure about his ability to be a provider again. And something interesting that I learned, my parents, they really didn't want to talk about this. As the struggles they went through, they would prefer to not remember them. And going to America was a betrayal of what they were told, what they thought they would experience. So they're still processing how they feel living in America. As soon as possible, they want to retire in the Philippines, and that is something eventually I will try and help with. And this is the end.
Thanks, Josh. Hope you're recovering well. Right. All right, y'all. I know we're at time, and again, thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your family stories. For next week, we have one of our old organizers coming in to talk about philanthropy, psychology, and mental health. And yeah, I know we have 2 more people that will present when we come back next week. So Emerald and Jasmine will be presenting. And yeah, Jared, did you have any announcement?
Yeah, sorry we didn't have enough time to meet with your group, to have you meet with your groups today. But so if you can, try to meet with your groups, on your own time. If you need to coordinate with each other or communicate with each other about anything. But overall, thank you all so much for presenting today. hope you all learned so much about each other as much as I did. It was really great to see everyone's families and all the pictures. Very nice to really get to know who everyone is a little bit more.
Yeah. Thank you all for your vulnerabilities in this circle. And again, whatever is said here stays here. And yeah, again, thank you so much for just being here. Good night.
Good job, everyone.
Thank you for your time, everyone. Good night.
Good night. Bye, Mar.
Awesome.